Okay, so it is time for my end of week reading vlog for week 3 for June 2020. Now, if you missed my last reading vlog, which I did for the end of week 2, then just a little bit of a heads up. Last week I ended up having a couple of, about 4 days where I wasn't reading, so I am a bit behind in my TBR for June, and in fact I still remain 2 books behind. So my final 2 books that I did discuss in my June TBR, which are the 5th books, both respectively in Vampire Academy and Mistborn, will not be read this month. They will carry over to next month. I will still conclude both series by the end of next month. I just won't be reading the second last books this month because I just don't have the time. But now that we've got that out the way, hello and welcome. This is the end of week reading vlog for week 3 of June 2020. Let's get right into it. Okay, so the first book that I read this week was Scythe by Neil Shusterman. This is a YA sci-fi book, and I ended up giving it 5 stars because I really enjoyed it. Really interesting fact that I found out after the fact of rating it myself. This book is a polarizing book as far as reviews are concerned. Some people really seem to love this book, while others really seem to dislike this book, and I really can't understand why. Nor can I really understand why it's being marketed as a YA sci-fi. Personally, I would be marketing it as a YA low fantasy. It does... This book does... The world of this book, I should say, does exist in our world, or supposedly in our world, and so therefore it's low fantasy and not high fantasy, but I don't see the sci-fi elements in it, and if you do, if you've read this book and you see why it is a sci-fi, please let me know in the comments below, because I'm still trying to understand it. It's been quite a number of days since I finished this book, and I'm still scratching my head trying to wonder how it was marketed as a sci-fi. Anyway, I won't talk too much about this book here. I will talk more about it when we do the wrap-up at the end of the month, at the end of next week. But I went into this book really anxious because while it had a really exciting premise, I was nervous to see how the execution would go, considering that I had read a book in week 1 of June 2020 that also I felt had an amazing premise, and it fell rather flat. Not so with this book. The premise was really exciting, but the execution was just as amazing, and I find it interesting that there are people out there who don't like this book. I guess everyone is different and everyone does have their own opinions, but I feel that this book really strongly sticks to the premise. What you see in the premise is what you get from the execution. So, I don't know. I'm really surprised at that, but if you've read this book and you don't like it, let me know in the comment section below why you don't, and let's try and talk about this. I thought it was really amazing. So, as I said, I'm not going to talk too much about this book other than to say that I really enjoyed it and that I did plan to do a review on this book, but I simply ran out of time. If I have time next week, I'll try and do a review for this book, but I have so many videos that I'm planning on doing next week, considering that we will be at the halfway mark for the year, and there's a lot of additional videos that I plan on doing, so I don't know if I'm going to have time to review this book, but I do want it known that I really enjoyed myself, thoroughly enjoyed myself reading this book, and I ended up giving it 5 stars. Let's move on to the second book that I read in the third week of June 2020, and the second book that I read this week was this book, Catching Fire, which is the second book in the Hunger Games series. Now, I read the first book in the Hunger Games series in May, and even though it was really popular when the first book first came out, and of course when the first film came out, I really knew nothing about the series going into it, but I came into the first book not knowing anything about it at all. At all. There are books where I've gone in knowing minimal information, or at least having some sort of an idea as to what goes on. I had no idea what was going on with Hunger Games before I started reading it, and I came out loving that book, and I was so excited to read this one. This book, Catching Fire, the second book in the series, is a good book. I believe that if you were to judge this book of its own accord, that you would give it 5 stars, because it is a really good book. The problem for me personally is that I went into this book with an expectation and a longing that never really seemed to eventuate. I'm not going to talk about what my expectation and longing was, because it would be a spoiler and it would give away excuse me, it would give away too many things about the series as a whole. But halfway through this book, or around about halfway through the book anyway, there is a big twist that occurs that no one in this world, certainly not me, expected. And once the twist had been revealed, I knew that there would be no way that I was going to get what I wanted, what I was longing for in this book, which was really disappointing. So the book went along and it concluded, and I really had no idea how I was going to go about rating this. I was going between 3 and 4 stars, really had no clue what I was going to do, because I was disappointed not with the book, and that's something that I want to make a point of. I want people to know, I want you guys to know that I wasn't disappointed with the book. The book was great. I was disappointed with the fact that the expectations and the longing that I had for something to occur in this book didn't happen, and that disappointed me. So sort of choices that the writer Susan Collins made, that disappointed me. But the book on its own as a whole was still a good book. I was debating between giving it 3 or 4 stars, and I ended up erring on the higher side, because I figured if I just view the book as a standalone and without the expectation and longing that I had, what would I give this book? And so I realized that going into this book with no expectations, I would have come out erring on the higher side, because it still was a good book despite my own very personal disappointment. So I ended up giving this book 4 stars, and I enjoyed it for what it was. However, there is a really big twist that occurs right at the end of the book, which is what steered me away from giving it 5 stars, because something happens at the end of this book that I didn't like. I have to be honest. I just did not. There were 2 twists in this book, and I didn't like either of them. The book's great, but I just wasn't a fan of them. And I feel that it is pushing the series into a direction that, being mindful of spoilers, a direction that I don't know if I'm going to enjoy. Now, the 3rd book in this series I am going to be reading in July 2020. You will see it on my July TBR. But I will be going into that book really anxious, because if what I think is going to happen does end up happening, I think it will greatly disappoint me. So, now I put reviews up onto Goodreads, and of course I also do reviews of most of my books. As I said earlier, I did not do a review of Scythe. If I get a chance, I will. But I did do a review of this book, and if you're watching this right now, the moment it's premiering, you will see that review tomorrow. I made sure to purposefully set it up for tomorrow, even though I filmed it yesterday. And if you want to know why I was so disappointed, if you've read the book already, or if you don't mind spoilers, then certainly go ahead and check that out. You'll get notifications for that tomorrow. If you're watching this after that, if you're watching this video delayed, then just go to my playlist under my reviews and look for the Hunger Games 2 Catching Fire review. And in the spoiler section, you'll see why I was disappointed and why I'm really anxious to read the 3rd book, because if it's going in the direction I think it is, then it's just going to really disappoint me. But let's move on now to the 3rd and final book that I read this week, the 3rd week of June 2020, and the 3rd book that I read this week was this book, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Now, granted, this book is not like the traditional Harry Potter book covers. This is a first edition copy of The Order of the Phoenix, and for the UK version of The Order of the Phoenix. As Harry Potter is a series that I not only love, but it's my second favourite series of all time, I really want to recollect all of the first editions. I have all of them up to and including The Order of the Phoenix, but I don't have the original versions, cover versions of the second last one, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, just had to think there for a moment, and of course this one as well, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. But I am looking to replace them. I've been giving it a lot of thought of how I can go about trying to replace them, because a lot of bookstores don't have these versions anymore. I did have them once upon a time when they were first released. So to give you a very quick rundown of Harry Potter, my mum purchased the first 3 books for me and gave them to me at Christmas of the year that the third book, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, came out. She knew that I loved reading, she knew that I loved magic, she wasn't wrong, I fell in love with the series right away. From the 4th book onwards, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, I went out and purchased the books pretty much moments after they came out. I was never on a pre-order list, because that's just not something that I do. I don't pre-order anything, although if there are certain books that came out these days that excited me, I probably would go on a pre-order, but back then I didn't. But I still did purchase the original versions of them, the UK original versions, that is. Unfortunately, what happened was about, oh gosh, I don't even know how long ago, but let's say about 10 years ago, roughly anyway, I travelled abroad. I went interstate and stayed there for a little while, thinking that I was doing a bit of a sea change. Didn't last that long. I ended up staying interstate for about a month before coming back home. I live in Melbourne, Australia, so I then came back because I missed Melbourne. Nothing against the state that I went to, I just missed being at home. But before I went away, I actually gave away pretty much all of the books I owned. There's like 1 or 2 books that I still have that I had taken with me, but I didn't have a lot of luggage on me, so I had to sacrifice books. And I am very disheartened by the fact that I let go of Harry Potter only to come back a month later and wish that I still had it. So I'm trying to recoup all of the first edition books. Anyway, let's get back to what I was saying about the Deathly Hallows. So once again, this is the 3rd book that I read in June of 2020. I have literally just finished this book. I have not done a review for it, but you will most likely get a review for this book on Tuesday. As I said earlier, the review for the second Hunger Games book, Catching Fire, will come out tomorrow. Most likely you will get this one on Tuesday. I just finished this. I literally finished this book, turned on my camera and started filming, and I am sitting in a ton of emotions. I tried so hard not to cry so many times, and when we got to the penultimate chapter where the massive climax occurs, again, even though most people that are watching this probably have read Harry Potter, for those who haven't, I don't want to spoil anything, because it's always spoiler free when I do these end of week vlogs. The penultimate climax, when that occurred, I tried so hard not to cry, and I still cried anyway. And then after the penultimate chapter, the ultimate climax, the penultimate chapter, and then after the ultimate climax had occurred, there's a moment where we're dealing with the aftermath. And during the aftermath, there is a moment where there are some characters that are... There are 2 characters that are having a discussion, and I started crying, full on crying. Oh my god. Harry Potter is my second favourite series of all time, and had you asked me up to the 3rd week of January or February? Anyway, had you asked me prior to my reading Mistborn, I would have said Harry Potter is my favourite series of all time, but ever since I finished the first book in the Mistborn series, you can kind of see it just sneaking up here, the Final Empire, Mistborn, the original era, the first era in the Mistborn series, the first 3 books, became my favourite series, and this is my second favourite series. But in saying that, J.K. Rowling is such an amazing writer, and I know that Harry Potter had so much popularity, well, a certain amount anyway, when the books came out, and then of course when the films came out, it became even more popular because, let's face it, especially back then, there weren't a lot of readers. Despite the fact that J.K. Rowling put a lot of people onto reading, there weren't a lot of readers when Harry Potter first came out, as opposed to what there is now. The movies then started coming out, and then of course the books became even more popular. I even remember, here's a little tidbit for you, when I was in high school, I had a group of friends that I was hanging around, and I was the only one of the friends that was reading the books, and whenever I had finished up to wherever we're up to in the series, prior to the first film coming out, I would go back to the start and read again, and go back to the start and read again, because I just loved it so much, and no other book series seemed to compare to it at all. And I received quite a bit of flack from my friends for reading this book, like, who cares about Harry Potter, and da-da-da. I did not have Harry Potter friends. And then the first film, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, here in Australia, in the US, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, came out. And the very next day after one of my friends watched this film, I remember we had gone to a performance. I was at high school, I did all of the performing arts classes, and for dance class we were taken out to watch a live performance of Singing in the Rain, and I remember sitting in the crowd waiting for the show to start, and my friend was seated behind me, and she tapped me on the shoulder and she said, "Do you still have that Harry Potter book?" And I said, "Yeah, of course, it's in my bag. Like, I'm one of those people that I always have a book in my bag." So yeah, of course I do. And she said, "Is there any way that I can look at it? Can I read it?" And so I said, "Look, I don't mind if you read it for a little bit now while we wait for the show, but ultimately I want it back." So I gave the book to her, and another one of my friends who was sitting behind me there, like, looking at the book like it's the best thing in the world. So I know that there was a major difference in popularity with the series once the films had come out, but I've been a lover of this series for a very long time, and the point I'm trying to make is that this series still holds up to this very day. Oh my goodness. The climax of this book is so very powerful in and of itself. Not only is the climax so very powerful, but everything just comes together in the end in a way that is just so amazing. And I don't think I appreciated just how much work J.K. Rowling put into the first 6 books when I first read the 7th book, but upon reread of it this time, and being that I am more well-read now ever since starting my booktube channel this year, I'm certainly realizing different things that I didn't back then with all the other books. But with this one, what I'm realizing is once we get to the 3rd last chapter onwards, every little thing that we have learnt along the way, you can see why it occurred, because it was a seed for the wrap-up of the series, and it's just so good. So I don't want to say too much here because, again, I'm being mindful of spoilers, but when I do the review, there is so much that I have to say that I probably can't talk about everything because of the limited amount of time, but I feel that we may be dealing with another 2-parter when we get to this review, like we had with Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, because it's just so good. One thing I will say for those of you who are thinking that I'm just gushing about this book and I have no qualms or criticisms about this book, I do. And I will be the first to say that I have this saying that I like to use, which is, if I love someone as much as I do, like with J.K. Rowling, I feel I have the right to criticize them because I love them so much, so I feel I have that right? There are criticisms that I have of this book, and one of the biggest criticisms that I have is within the first half. Within the first half of this book, there is a questing, travelling trope that J.K. Rowling decided to add into the book that I am not a fan of. And I knew this after, well, the first time I read the book, I kind of struggled to get through the first half because I have to say I found it a little bit boring. This time upon reread, the first half of the book, it was more intriguing to me than the first time I read it, because knowing everything that I know allowed me to fully encompass everything that's going on, as opposed to the first time when I read this book where I was specifically looking for certain answers, and certain answers alone. Like a certain character, if they are good or evil, for example, and the penultimate not penultimate, the ultimate thing that's going to happen at the end of the book and how that's going to go. This time, knowing everything, I was, as I said, able to be so much more, it was so much more self-encompassing reading it. In saying that, I still don't like most of the first half of the book, and I apologize to hardcore Harry Potter fans. I am one of them, absolutely I am, but I just don't like questing tropes, I don't like travelling tropes, but worse than that, I much prefer to read a questing trope or a travelling trope, provided that the characters know where they're going and they know what they're doing. And in this book, in the first half, the characters go off in and they go through a questing and travelling trope, knowing what the end goal is, but having no idea how to get there, and having some idea, maybe like 10% of an idea of what it is they're looking for in the first place, and that just really annoyed me. In fact, there is a point in this book where one of the characters shouts at the protagonist saying, I thought you knew. Actually, we both thought, because there are 3 characters, we both thought that you knew what you were doing and where you were going, but you don't. And I was just thinking, yes, exactly. It's so annoying that you don't know what you're doing. And I get it, I do, because Harry, the protagonist, has only limited information, but it's still frustrating to read a book that is just swerving heedlessly in a direction that we don't know because we don't have enough information, and that does annoy me. But the second half of the book, or more to the point, the final third of the book, is so freaking amazing that it makes up for it in so many ways, and I'm trying so hard not to cry, because it's, oh my god, it's so good. So prepare for my review on this book, which I would like to get done today if I can. Maybe I can. We'll see how we go. But anyway, that review will come out on Tuesday. I assume it will come out on Tuesday. Yeah, pretty convinced it'll come out on Tuesday. So there you go. Because this is an end of a week wrap up, and I'm all caught up in my feelings of this book, absolutely. But because it is an end of week wrap up, I'm going to try and keep it as brief as I can and say, so there you go. This is the third book that I read this week. I'm umming and ahhing as to what to give this book, but I don't think I can go less than 5 stars. I think there are absolutely valid reasons not to give this book 5 out of 5 stars, but I just feel that regardless of any con that does appear in this book, and as I say, the first half of the book is a massive chunk, but regardless of any con that I personally feel this book has, I can't give it less than 5 stars because the ending is so freaking amazing that there's just no way that it would do this book justice. So, this is the third book that I read for this week, the third week of June 2020, and I absolutely will, I've just decided now, live on camera, I've just decided will receive 5 stars. It is the final book in the Harry Potter series. Okay, so let's move on to the final 3 books that I am going to be reading in the month of June 2020, the 3 books I'm going to read for week 4. And once again, just a very quick reminder that the plan was to end June of 2020 having read this book, Vampire Academy, the 5th and penultimate, this is the right place to use that word, Mr. Rancy, the penultimate book in the Vampire Academy series, as well as this book, Shadows of Self, the 5th and penultimate book in the Mistborn series. But as I did say earlier, and I have been saying since week 2 when I did my end of week wrap up over there, or my catch up, I should say, vlog over there, because I've run out of time, these 2 books I will still read, but I won't have time this month, so they will be moved over to the... Specifically, I will say this because I planned it. The moment I had gotten through the days where I wasn't reading, I already knew exactly what I was going to do. These are going to become the first 2 books that I read in July. Okay, let's move on. So too what I am going to be reading for the 4th week of June 2020, and the first book that I'm going to read is the second book in the Reckoners series, Firefight. So in May I read Steelheart, the first book in the Reckoners series. This is by Brandon Sanderson. It is a YA superhero. I think it's a superhero sci-fi or something like that. And I'm not a fan of really anything superhero. I don't read comic books. I'm not a fan of Marvel. Any of that kind of stuff, it doesn't interest me, but I borrowed Steelheart from my library without knowing that it was a superhero book because it was by Brandon Sanderson, so I thought it was a fantasy book, and once I found out it was a superhero book, I had already fallen in love with it, and I gave the predecessor to this book 5 stars. Just to recap some memories, that is this book, Steelheart. So I borrowed this book from my library, and the only reason that I still have it about a month later is because or month, or actually 2, I think I read it in April actually. 2 months later is because of COVID-19. The library has suspended returns because of the outbreak of COVID-19 and the fact that we're still, even at this point, we're still in lockdown, so I still have it. I am planning on replacing this book, but unfortunately, as with a lot of books, we can't really get a lot of American covers here in Australia, why? Can someone please explain to me why it is so freaking hard to get an American cover of a book? Because I love this cover. I think it's... I'm sorry about the glare, but there you go. I think it's really beautiful. And the other one is completely different, but I'm just going to have to deal with that and purchase the Australian cover. I am going to replace this once I do return it, but this was the first book in the series, Steelheart. So I gushed so much about that book when I did the review on it, and you can find that in my playlist under reviews, Steelheart. This is the second book. In that review of Steelheart, I said, I am so looking forward to I said Fireflight or Firefight. It is called Firefight. So there's my correction for what I said in April. And I had put this book on order with my local bookstore who are delivering me books because the book wasn't available at that time, but clearly it is now, and I finally get to read it again, and I'm so happy because the first book was so good, despite the fact that I don't like superhero books at all. I loved that book, and it's not because I just love everything that Sanderson wrote. Every time I read a Brandon Sanderson book, I go into it allowing the book to be what it is. If it disappoints me, I will let you know. Hello, 4th book in the Mistborn series. If you have not seen that review, I definitely recommend you check it out because it was not my favourite Sanderson book by far. But Steelheart I did love, and I'm very much looking forward to this. This is the first book I'm going to read in week 4 of June 2020, Firefight by Brandon Sanderson, the second book in the Reckoners series. The second book I'm going to be reading in week 4 of June 2020 is this book, Insurgent by Veronica Roth. This is the second book in the Divergent series. Again, the American covers are not available, and it's really annoying. Some people say they prefer this cover to the American cover, but the American cover has like a fireball thing on the cover and it looks really awesome, but I can't get a copy of it. It's really annoying. Still, I actually had this book and I don't remember how I had it in my possession. I don't remember if I purchased it or if someone gave it to me. I don't believe there's any note in here. No, there's not. So I don't know how I had this already, but I did, and I'm so happy about that because when I read the first book in the Divergent series, named Divergent, I went into it loving the film. I'd seen the film many times, never read the book. I loved the film so much that I was really anxious that the first book in the series was going to kind of spoil the film for me, and because it wasn't going to be as good as the film, it was so much better than the film, so I can't wait to read the second book, Insurgent by Veronica Roth. It will be the second book that I read in the final week of June 2020. The final book that I'm going to read in June 2020 is from arguably my third favourite series of all time, and it is the second series that I only started reading this year, and that is the Selection series. A couple of months ago, I read the first book in the oh, it's literally right behind me this whole time. This one, The Selection, and I gave it 5 stars. It was so much fun. Then I read this one next to it, The Elite. I have 2 copies of it. I'm planning on giving one away at some point. Last month. And it was Oh, there were things that happened in the Elite that I was not expecting, but the author, Kiera Cass, she went there in that second book, but it made it even better than the first book. So both of those books received 5 stars, so I can't wait to get onto the third book. Here it is. It is called The One. So this is the last book I'm going to be reading this month, and I'm really not disappointed that I'm ending on this book, despite the fact that I'm not going to end the week with Rochelle Mead or with Brandon Sanderson. I do love this series so much, so I'm actually pretty excited to end the month with this book. We'll see how we go. So, these are the books that I read in week 3 of June 2020. Scythe, which I gave 5 stars. Hunger Games 2 Catching Fire, which I gave 4 stars, and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, which I just finished reading and just announced to you live on camera that I will be giving 5 stars. These are the books that I'm going to be reading this week. The order is the wrong way round, and I do apologise about that. There we go. Starting off with Firefight by Brandon Sanderson, the second book in the Reckoners series, then on to Insurgent, the second book in the Divergent series, and then on to The One, the third book in the Selection series. So if you want to buddy read with me, this is what I'm going to be reading in the third week, and that will definitely happen, and I'm going to do everything in my power to ensure that I do read all of these books in week 4, no matter what happens. So, touch wood, nothing bad does happen, and I can get through them all. But anyway, this has been a very long end of week vlog, which I did not plan on, but that is where we are at. It's been a pretty reasonable week for me, reading-wise, so can't wait to get on to next week. So, as I mentioned earlier with Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, look out for my review. It is coming out on Tuesday. As to the second Hunger Games book, Hunger Games Catching Fire, look out for that review tomorrow, or if you're watching this delayed, go to my review section and look for Hunger Games 2 Catching Fire, or if you go to my playlist section, Harry Potter, because I have a specific Harry Potter section, then you can find the Harry Potter reviews over there. If I have time, I will do Scythe as well, but I probably won't have time because I have all these videos that I want to do for the fact that we've made it to the halfway mark of this year, and I'm really excited about that. Yay. Oh, before we go, big announcement just for me. If you guys find this to be really awesome, then yay. But I just want to make this announcement to put in the vault, basically, is that the next book I'm reading, Firefight, is actually my 50th book that I'm reading this year. I am so happy. I started this year having a goal to read 12 books, then I upped that to 50, and this is the 50th book. So I then upped my books that I want to read this year to 100, and I'm definitely on track to do that. I'm so happy. Before the month is even over, provided I keep to my schedule, I will have read 52 books by the end of this month. So yay, we're on track to reach 100 books, and that is so, so good. Alright guys, I've spoken enough. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you if you've sat through this whole video. Thank you so, so much. I'm at an exciting moment in my reading life at the moment. So yeah, just really happy about that. But I will leave that there, letting you guys go. Peace, blessings, and so, so, so much love. Mwah. Thank you so much for watching. I post videos every Monday, Thursday, and Sunday with reviews in between. Until then, I will see you next time. Bye guys, happy reading. Bye.